but today very honored to be part of the event that's being hosted here at the EDB. So I just wanted to give a few words introduction before we get going with today's program. I wanted to explain why we're organizing this event today. Essentially, Mauritius has largely been COVID-free. Well, it's entirely COVID-free for the last 4 months or so, and we're back in business. You know, businesses are working, the country is running, and we're soon to open the flights. And what we normally do as a country, being a very open economy, is to organize trade missions to promote investment into the country. However, not being able to do that with COVID, we've resorted to a series of webinars, and this is the first of a series. So welcome to this event. Today's session will be in 3 clear chunks. So first of all, there will be a general overview of Mauritius and investment opportunities here and a number of features of the jurisdiction. Then the second part will be a panel discussion with the people you see around you. And we'll be again talking about what it's like to do business with Mauritius and in Mauritius, the good things, the less easy things about it. And that will give you for half an hour the sort of overview of what it's like to do business here. And then the last part of it will be a testimony from one of the success stories to have really built a business in Mauritius from Grit real estate. So more about that later. So we'll try to keep the whole thing to about an hour and try to stop at the top of the hour. If there is a slight drift, we certainly have a hard stop at a quarter past the hour, so it won't go above 75 minutes in any event. So please bear with us for that amount of time. And I just wanted to very quickly introduce you to the people around us before we move to our first presentation. So to my right is Faraz Wajid. Faraz heads up the financial services cluster at the EDB, which is the government's agency that promotes investment, but he'll tell us more about that. To my immediate left is Richard Robinson. Richard is the president of the South African Chamber of Commerce. In Mauritius for, we're counting, nearly 17 years now, and we'll be sharing the perspective from South African business in Mauritius. And then to the far left is Samad Jaman. Samad heads up the Association of Financial Services in Mauritius. And then we have 2 other people who are not around us on this table, but are connecting remotely. So firstly is Mix Szymanski, who heads up the Mauritius Africa Fintech Hub. He'll be telling us a bit more about that later on. And of course, Bronwyn Corbett from Grit Real Estate. So without further ado, I think I've kept this to 5 minutes. I'm going to hand over to Faraz, who's going to really give us an overview of what opportunities there are in Mauritius and what's there to do here.
Thank you so much, Daniel. A very good morning to all of you joining us from everywhere and anywhere across the world. You know, like Daniel said, the purpose of this webinar is really to showcase Mauritius as a business hub and as a financial center. Normally, we are used to go about to different jurisdictions and we showcase the salient features of Mauritius, but because of the pandemic, we are unable to do that. So we thought it's good to keep the conversation going, and it is also important to provide the international investing community with strategic updates of what is happening in the country and how we are faring as a jurisdiction. So to begin with, Daniel, like you mentioned, I am from the Economic Development Board of Mauritius. The EDB is the strategic planning entity and arm of the government of Mauritius, but at the same time, it is an investment promotion agency. So we are mandated to do trade and investment promotion, to engage in the country branding initiatives for Mauritius. And at the same time, we are a quasi-regulator because we regulate the acquisition of immovable properties by non-citizens, and at the same time we are the regulatory body for providing work and leave permits to the foreign bridesmaids wish to come to Mauritius. Um, now, as some of you may be aware, over the years, Mauritius has transformed substantially. We have shifted from a monocrop economy towards a diversified, knowledge-based, and innovation-driven economy. At the same time, sorry, I'm just hearing some echo. As a courtesy, if it is possible, would all of you guests joining in, would you please mute your microphone because it is making an echo here. Thank you so much. Now, like I was saying, the country has gradually evolved, Daniel, to become a business hub and to become a financial center of choice. But at the same time, it is a closely knitted economy where you have diverse areas of strategic importance for the international investing community. And I would like to cite a few of them because for reasons related to our geographical location, Mauritius is well poised for a multitude of sectors. For instance, the agro industry, the aquaculture, education, healthcare, property development, but at the same time, small cities, logistics, and manufacturing. That the government has done with regard to the financial services center, and that was to make Mauritius an international financial center of choice and repute. So, as a financial center, Mauritius offers an paralleled and well-regulated and transparent platform for the international investing community. There is, of course, a plethora of services which enable successful cross-border movement and investments into the African continent. We offer a breadth and depth of structuring through regional headquarters, through LLPs, treasury management, global funds, investment holdings, amongst others. But at the same time, and most importantly, we have a very compelling value proposition for intra-African mobility of investment. So the way that we look at it, the financial services center in Mauritius caters for the corporates and for the exceptionally affluent and high net worth individuals. In terms of corporates, you would have your structuring, you would have your headquarters, treasury management, amongst others. For the high net worth individuals, you have always a plan B should you wish to relocate in a jurisdiction which is safe, which is well reputed. At the same time, it allows you to do your trust and estate planning in Mauritius. And most importantly, it is a jurisdiction where you can safely park your wealth, grow your wealth and your assets. And that I feel is extremely important. Now, Mauritius is also a jurisdiction that has the merit of a civil law jurisdiction as well as a common law jurisdiction, and until today we still allow our last court of appeal is the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council, which gives the international investing community kind of a comfort when they wish to come to Mauritius. But at the same time, And I just want to end on this, Daniel, because I don't want to take too much of time. At the same time, Mauritius is party to the New York Convention and to the Multilateral Investment Guarantee Agency. So we protect your investments, and you have arbitration for all the investments that are structured through Mauritius through the bilateral investment treaties. And I think that is a very important part. And, with your permission later, I can elaborate more on this.
Thank you very much, Faraz. That was quite a canter in exactly 8 minutes across. So if I understand correctly, you've summarized a few of the sectors where there are investment opportunities, and we can come back to this later if you wish. You've also talked about the interest for corporates. So there will be a set of things which are of interest to corporates, others to individuals. I guess there may be things for professionals as well, but we can talk about this a bit later. And then you gave us a brief overview of the legal and sort of infrastructural setup that would enable these things to come through. I had one other question for you at this point in time, which is you briefly talked about what the EDB was, which is you talked about promotion agency, but do you have anything to do with helping people who want to come in as well in terms of facilitation? Can you give us a quick overview of that role?
Absolutely, Daniel. I mean, there are two ways that we look at this. The first thing is all the investors who come to Mauritius are extremely important, and at the level of the EDB, we not only promote, but we have a hand-holding kind of red carpet treatment for all the investors. We have opened the country. The government's vision is to open the country for foreign investors, and we as a government agency, we are here to handhold those investors. We assist them, we advise them whenever they need permits, whenever they need any other, they need to comply with regulations, we advise them as an agency. And at the same time, after hand-holding them, after they have set up their operations in Mauritius, we provide an aftercare facility and aftercare service to ensure that they're able to set up properly in Mauritius. They have set up properly in Mauritius, but they're able to grow their business. They're able to expand their footprint, not only in Mauritius, but also in the African continent. And that is an important aftercare service that we offer at the level of the EDB. So you may have an investor who has domiciled his activities in Mauritius, and he's investing in the pharmaceutical production, manufacturing in Mauritius, and then tomorrow, he has some issues in exporting in a specific market. At the level of the EDB, we can take that and we try to find solutions to any problem that he's having at the level of the EDB. But at the same time, another part of this work is of course we are open to foreign talents. And at the level of the EDB, we provide a work and live permit, but I am happy to talk about that later as well.
Thank you very much. But I think the important takeaway here is that you actually have powers under the law to help speed up applications. Absolutely. And to look into what's blocking things, just to make things happen as well. So that's great. Well, thank you very much. So if you're
can I just add one? You've mentioned a good point, Daniel. And I think the powers is vested at the level of the EDB as well, to ensure that there is no bureaucratic red tape in Mauritius, and there is a fast-track committee that is chaired by none other than the Prime Minister of Mauritius, and all the projects that are all the investment projects that are having bottlenecks in Mauritius or regulatory uncertainty in Mauritius, the EDB takes them directly in the fast-track committee, and we ensure that the projects are fast-tracked. So thank you for this.
Thank you. That's very good. Well, if you're still watching and you're still with us, so hopefully you've got a sense of what we do, what's on offer, and the broad brushstrokes of the framework. And that's the first 15 minutes completed. We're only 1 minute late. Thank you for your patience and interest. So we're now proposing to move to the next bit of today's schedule, which is really a broad and general panel discussion with the people around this table and our friend Miggs, who's online and who will, I'm sure, appear in due course on your screens. So the whole point of this is to really talk about the business opportunities in Mauritius, to talk about the practitioners and professionals' perspective on all of that. And Fahaz would be here to give the regulatory sort of government perspective as well. So if I may turn to Richard, perhaps. I mean, before we start, Richard, I don't know if you want to say a few words about who you are and what you do in Mauritius, and move on to
pleasure.
other things. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so my name is Richard Robinson. For my sins, I'm the president of the South African Chamber of Commerce, soon to be relieved. The Chamber of Commerce we founded it in about 6 years ago. As a result of the fact that we felt that we needed a voice, we needed a corporate voice to be able to go and engage with government and government departments on any issues that South Africans, or anybody in fact that was dealing with South Africa, trading in South Africa and Mauritius had. Also living conditions or working conditions, etc. Things that they didn't want to engage with as an individual. So we created the Chamber of Commerce, and it's been an enormous success. In fact, I got some stats last week. Nobody knows exactly how many South Africans are on the island, because a lot of South Africans come here and they don't register with the High Commissioner, for example. So we know how many permits have been issued, 962 occupation permits, but so theoretically those people are all living and working in Mauritius. But then there's other people that retire here and do all sorts of things, and they've set up, they've bought residences in some of the IRSs and the special schemes that they've designed for foreigners. But that's not a significant number. That's in total about 600 odd South Africans have done that. So extrapolating that, we think there's somewhere in the region of about 3,500 South Africans, all said and told, including kids and spouses, which is not a lot of people. I mean, we don't really register. But if you ask the man in the street how many South Africans are living here, they'll give you a number anywhere between 50 and 100,000 because we're noisy people. So the chamber's been very good. We've got about 400 members in the chamber. It's not a true chamber of commerce. We don't employ people as economists. We don't have that at all. We do engage with government, and we do send through ideas, and where we think they've misstepped, we send them a note to say that this is what we think you should be doing if you want to encourage more foreign investment in the country. But most of the time what we do is we give a safe landing pad for new people coming to Mauritius. There's a network within there that's all been vetted. So all of our members go through a vetting process, so we're very comfortable to pass them on to newbies on the island that need assistance, whatever it might be, because we have a plethora of different industries that we cover. A lot of them are financial, so banking, insurance, asset management, management companies. A lot of those type of guys are within our membership group. Myself, my two businesses, with my partners, we started an asset management business in 2003. So that was 17 years ago. And it wasn't a tremendously difficult process to get into the Mauritius, because we were right on the cusp of the Mauritian bubble. This was right at the beginning of a very steep growth path that Mauritius enjoyed. And they were extremely welcoming of foreigners. It then tightened up a bit, and now it's loosening up a bit, and so it goes through different phases. But so we got here with that business, and it was very successful. And then we've also got a life insurance company that we own here in Mauritius as well. So it's been an interesting trajectory. But yeah, we get a lot of South African, where there is currently a lot of South African interest, unfortunately, predominantly as a result of the South African problems that they're experiencing at the moment. And a lot of people there are looking at potential plan B. Do we start something that we can go to in the event that South Africa collapses, God forbid? And potentially if something happens from a safety perspective, so people with young kids are saying, well, do I want to expose them to any kind of threat back in South Africa? And Mauritius is a very easy transition for that. It's a very easy place to move to. I would draw the parallel. It's almost like moving from Gauteng down to Cape Town. It's an extra 2 hours further, but you don't feel like you've actually left the country. You're almost still in a South African bubble, because it's a very similar lifestyle. there's enough South Africans to make your transition here very easy. And the South Africans tend to aggregate in one of two places. So we all live amongst each other. So that is quite comforting from that perspective. Yeah, so from a business perspective, it's been a very interesting ride, very, very good ride for us and for my family to be here. My kids went through school, which was first class. It was really an international school. They went back to South Africa to do their university. Now you have a lot of options in Mauritius that you can do university here. But they went back, and having schooled in Mauritius, university in South Africa was first year, where most kids seem to bomb out. They had a very, very easy time of first year because they'd actually done it in school already. So that was great. And there's more and more schools opening up all the time in the various different jurisdictions, various different centers in Mauritius. So again, there's choice now where there wasn't when I was here. Infrastructure, it's a completely different place. I mean, it was a 2-hour journey from the airport up to Grand Bay, which is where I live. Previously, dodging buses and scooters and cows and sheep and you name it. And now it's a double lane freeway. So it really is, it has come on in leaps and bounds. Some of it good infrastructure, some of it not so good. It's not all roses. But I think, you know, somebody said to me the other day, you know, we're thinking of leaving Mauritius. And I said, where are you going to go? And he says, well, I'm not sure yet. I'm thinking about it. I said, well, when you find somewhere which is better, please let me know. Because I think you'd battle to find somewhere where you can have the type of lifestyle that you have in Mauritius. And under the circumstances that we live here, it really is an easy place to live and bring up kids.
Thank you for that overview. And I'm going to turn to Samad Jaman, if I may, and just asking whether, from your perspective and your membership, because your members are largely operators in the financial services sector, who would very often be a first port of call for anybody wishing to set up a business or invest in Mauritius. Are you seeing a lot of interest for Mauritius at this point in time as well?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Daniel. You're perfectly right. I think with what has been announced in the budget for the last couple of years, there has definitely been an interest, because in terms of the products and services that we are offering and the new licenses that we announced, we have a plethora of new licenses. I think if I name a few of them, I think the 5 years or 8 years a tax holiday on some of them. You have the global headquartering, the global global transfer, global treasury management, overseas family offices. You have a new one that was announced recently, which is wealth management services. You have the innovation-driven activities. So it's not only financial services. You also have peer-to-peer lending, which is a fintech platform. E-commerce platform was introduced earlier this year. There's also marine development, inland aquaculture, and more recently in the recent budget, we had the announcement of tertiary education campus. So a lot of these activities today, you can benefit to a 8 or 5 years tax holiday, of course, subject to certain conditions. And also, as mentioned earlier, with the lifestyle that you have in Mauritius, and something that we take for granted here locally is security and safety. A lot of people with young children today are looking at opportunities to bring the family in a place which is a lot safer and closer to home as well. This is where South Africa and Mauritius, with the connectivity, obviously we don't have the connectivity right now, but we hope the borders will be open very shortly. But there has been some interest in certain areas, and with what's happening now with COVID as well, whereby this country has actually managed COVID very well. We are COVID free, we can say, for the last 4 months. There haven't been any local cases. And there are some interest from people, not only in South Africa, but around the world, looking at opportunities when the border is open to come and for maybe work by the beach, which is something quite nice to do nowadays. People are working from home mostly, and the kids are studying online. It's a good opportunity maybe to come and work by the beach while the kids are studying online.
Thank you. And in fact, it sounds to be some convergence in what you're saying, that there is quite a bit of interest and a few opportunities here. So Richard mentioned a number of opportunities. You mentioned sort of financial services, etc. And Samad listed a few of the recent schemes that have come out, etc. If I turn to you, Fahad, can you share with us the sort of trends, the sort of queries you've received recently, and what sort of areas of interest there have been of late, the sort of things that are quite, that you're getting queries about at the moment?
Thank you, Daniel. And you're right. There is a convergence, and I corroborate with what Richard and Samad has been saying. I think if you look at where the jurisdiction has been and where it is going now, I think there is a lot of focus, especially from South African investors, to look at Mauritius as a jurisdiction where they can domicile their businesses and grow their investments. And I think in that specific point, I think there is a lot of interest for manufacturing companies to come to Mauritius. Those investors are looking at a jurisdiction where they have clarity from the government, from the policy's point of view. They understand the regional markets requirements, and they know that they can bring in their equipment in Mauritius. Their equipments are going to be safe here. There is stability, there is monetary, fiscal, economical stability in Mauritius. So pharmaceutical is one, and I'm talking about all segments of pharmaceuticals. So it is all manufacturing is one. So I'm talking about all segments of manufacturing is pharmaceutical, high precision, high-end manufacturing. So that's one. The other one is we're getting a lot of interest from the exceptionally affluent to domicile part of their wealth in Mauritius, and also to domicile their family offices in Mauritius, where they can grow their wealth. So on that particular point, Daniel, the government of Mauritius, in view of enhancing the offering of the jurisdiction in terms of private wealth, we have a family office scheme in Mauritius, which carries a 5-year tax holidays for all the income that is accrued to the family office. And because we want to make it as attractive to the broadest spectrum of high net worth individuals, what we have done is there's of course the single family office, but also the multiple family office. And what is interesting is, as compared to other jurisdictions that do offer family office, here in Mauritius, the minimum investable wealth is $5 million. So you have a net worth of $5 million. You can set up your single family office, or you can be part and managed by a multi-family office. At the back of it, you use a lot of structures that the jurisdiction already offers, like trust. Our Trust Act mirrors the conventional common law trust. So you have purpose trust, discretionary trust. We also, because like I mentioned earlier, we have the best of both worlds. So we have heavily imbued on civil code jurisdiction. So we have foundations as well. So that gives a comfort to the wealthy families, to the exceptionally affluent, to domicile part of their wealth in Mauritius, and we are seeing an increasing trend about that. But at the same time, Daniel, perhaps it is worth mentioning that a number of powerhouses, family managers are looking at Mauritius because they know that
to compete with Richard.
Yeah, to compete or to complement with the activities that Richard does, in a way that there is a lot of merit in choosing Mauritius for private or for wealth management, so private wealth and wealth management. And a number of family offices are looking at using protected cell companies, for instance, and which is one of the key attributes of the jurisdiction as well. I think
Samad will be talking about those as well. So really, two spheres. You're saying a lot of interest in pharma at the moment and manufacturing. Quite a lot of that. And then you also are getting things about really preservation of wealth and investment,
growing of wealth.
So a lot of trends in that respect. Thank you. So we've given a broad overview of living and working here, the main appeals, a sense of where the opportunities are. I just wanted to really focus back on living in Mauritius a little bit. So Richard very kindly shared, his perspective on this, having started 17 years ago now, and how that's changed, and the family sort of friendliness, etc. I don't know if Miggs is on the line and can hear us. And before we move on to the fintech area, I don't know if Miggs was able to maybe share a little bit with us the more personal approach of how you found it here and moving to Mauritius and relocating. Are you there, Miggs?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. Fire away.
Perfect. Hello, team. How's everybody doing? Thank you much for your time. And yeah, I mean, so officially I'm here, I think it's my second year next month. So a full 2 years in this neck of the woods. Just to share the sentiment with everybody here and to echo what Richard said, the integration coming here from South Africa, specifically I was out from Cape Town, was very, very smooth. For a little one to go to school, for the family to move out, the process was seamless. And, as I told all my friends back home, this is God's gift to mankind in terms of beauty. And on the business side, we combine that. I think we're starting to see a global approach to the business space that kind of ties the best of both worlds. So from our side, it's been a great 2-year journey. I'm really hoping with the change in legislation, my OP gets extended for another 8 years. Hint, hint, Mr. EBD. Because I think also it kind of highlights and shows the fact that for us to be able to get that opportunity and stay here for another 8 years, we would take it with both hands. So, the integration is quite smooth. There's some similarities and some kind of challenges, but like in any kind of environment moving forward. But I think we'll chat a little bit more about that from a fintech perspective, which is obviously where Mauritius is positioning itself in Africa as that hub. So I'll cover some of those things during our conversations around that.
Thank you, Miggs. But really, in terms of finding your feet here, so have you moved? I understand it's either the north or the west, isn't it? Are you a northern or western?
Oh my gosh, no. If I went to the west of the island, I'd be talking. You hear Afrikaans in the streets. I'm actually based in the north. I'm in the north end of the island. Yeah. No, I think it was purely the amount of schools there. So for my boy, he went to school in the north. So I think it was just natural to base, in the schooling district, and the quality of the schools, being kind of in the education sector in a private space in South Africa, it's important as a decision. Especially if you're going to be here for quite a while. So that was quite an easy decision. There are a lot of options available.
And how was the transition? Obviously coming from SA, putting people into schools, how do they settle in? Can you share any insights from your experience?
Yeah, I think the integration is quite easy. I think it's, if you come here for a specific purpose, so from a contract perspective, I think it's very easy to integrate. It's always a little bit harder on the spouse, whether it's the breadwinner or not the main breadwinner, from an integration perspective. But I think any change in life in general is going to be quite tough. From the partner's perspective, but I suppose that happens anywhere in the world. The integration is key, because a happy wife is a happy life, as we all know around the table. If it's the integration from that is good. Funny enough, if I may share a quick story, before I moved here, you do a little bit of due diligence, right? So you phone around, and people know people, and you phone people on the ground. And I'll never forget one conversation I had with somebody who said, Miggs, South Africa talks about Ubuntu, Mauritius lives it. And at the time, when I didn't know, how can this be? But I think, arriving here, and when you're interacting with different nationalities, different people from all over the world, from the east, from the west, from the continent, and everybody living in harmony and working together. I mean, for me, that's part of the reason I'm here. This hub of potential and global network of people living in harmony. And now I'm starting to sound like a preacher, but it really kind of, that point stuck to me, and yeah, became very, very valid.
Thank you, Vixen. Actually, to your point about spouses and things, I'm just going to turn to Faraz, who's really texting instead of following the conversation.
No. I'm looking at a point.
But I think I want to just clarify one thing with the ED, which is that if I understand correctly, when somebody comes to Mauritius on an occupational permit, and there are different schemes, the right to work of the spouse is not automatic. However, once people are here, if they find a job, it's actually fairly straightforward to flip it from a
And they apply
spouse
on
visa
their own right.
to a work permit of their own. Is that,
Absolutely.
can you just?
Sure. Daniel, normally, if you're coming as a dependent, be it as children, or be it as parents, or be it as spouse, you have a leave permit in Mauritius. Now, if you want to work in Mauritius,
that means you can live and come and go as much as you want.
Yeah, you're a resident of the country. But if you want to work in the country, then you will have to apply on your own right, and that would entitle you to get an occupation permit. And then later, if you would allow me, I would like to, to enumerate all the areas where the government has made improvements on the occupation permit front through the last budget, to make it a bit more welcoming, if I may use that word, for foreign talents.
Well, thank you, Faraz. So I think that wraps up our section on sort of living here. I think there's only that much we can do in half an hour and cover. We can pick up a few questions towards the end of this session, but I'm hoping people watching at home will get a sense of what it's been like for people to take the leap, at a personal level. Moving back to the business framework, so the less fun side of things, so to speak. I just wanted to perhaps invite Samad to talk a little bit about, and we're flipping back to corporates here. What is it like to set up a business here? Can you just give us an overview of the framework and what it's like if somebody wishes to do business with or through Mauritius? Over to you.
Thank you, Daniel. As far as mentioned earlier, doing business in Mauritius, we have the hybrid legal system, which is the French and the common law. And this has actually facilitated a lot of structures being set up in Mauritius. But also, I think one thing when you look out when setting up a business is the ease of doing business. If you look at the ease of doing business index by World Bank, Mauritius, we are on the 13th position today. And we have topped the African continent for the past a few years. And in addition to that, there are a lot of indices as well, which facilitate like the Ibrahim Index on good governance. This also, Mauritius has topped it for the last 13 years. They give you a sense of indication what sort of possibilities in which sort of jurisdiction you're dealing with. And today, with a facility of recruiting people in Mauritius, you have a highly skilled labor force and also a high qualified labor force, along with the right operators with this local multinationals, and give everybody the opportunities to think of one that would actually meet the requirements. So this helps a lot in choosing the right partner while you're doing business. And as a jurisdiction that is proven and tested over the years, Mauritius adhere to all the highest standards which have been put up by standard setting bodies, which help investors to use the jurisdiction. A quick example of that will give you, if you take the number of investment that goes into Africa, which are financed or funded by DFIs, Development Financial Institution, more than 50% of these are channels from Mauritius. That gives you the comfort of why the DFIs are using Mauritius, and this is why investors like to use Mauritius, to give them the comfort, the investment protection. And Mauritius has signed a lot of IPPAs, Investment Promotion and Protection Agreements, which help investors while using the jurisdiction.
Thank you. And Richard, coming back to you, you've set up a couple of businesses here at different points in time. Can you talk about just that particular perspective on the ease of doing business? I know, we talk about ease of doing business. There's always challenges and there's always difficulties. But are you able to just share with us how it's been for you?
No, I think we're praising Mauritius, but there also is the downside of everything has a challenge. Some businesses, setting up a business is not always as simple as what it says in the brochure. depending on the type of business that you're going into. There are certain businesses where Mauritius, there's protectionism involved, so Mauritius has identified that as being kept specifically for Mauritians, and that's fine. We don't have an issue with that. But we've found that people, a lot of South Africans come to Mauritius, they've come here on holiday, they think it's a fantastic place and they want to come back and set up a business here and set up their coffee shop that they had in South Africa and replicate it here. And it's just a no-go, it's a non-starter. It's really, really difficult to do that type of business. And a lot of them don't realize the size of the Mauritian market and the purchasing power or the lack of purchasing power in the domestic market. It's really relatively small compared to South Africa. I mean, it's a fraction of any of the big cities in South Africa. So I always tell people, be careful if you're coming here to do business domestically, unless you're obviously in a manufacturing plant, but that's not a domestic product. You're going to be marketing, you're going to be exporting that out to Africa or the rest of the world. But just really do your homework. I mean, some really big companies, including Pick n Pay, were left with their tail between their legs because they didn't make it in Mauritius. It's a highly, highly competitive market in some areas. And the guys run very good businesses here. Some Sino-Chinese people are very adept at running that type of business, and to compete with them is extremely difficult. But if you're coming to Mauritius to do business external to Mauritius all day long, so then I think there's huge opportunities for you. Having said that, I think there are areas within Mauritius which need assistance from people like South Africans. I mean, the biggest industry that could be Mauritius's industry, and it's saving grace, and the next big foot up will be the blue economy. I mean, the World Bank estimates that is valued at something like $24 trillion. And Mauritius has got 2 million square kilometers of it's called the EEZ,
exclusive
economic zone around the island. It's massive. So there's enormous potential there, and I think South Africa are quite good at that. They've got that whole Pakisa thing going in South Africa to promote that. Then on the island, obviously manufacturing, they've got a free port, which is another great industry for people to use as a tax-free zone where you can add value and ship off product without actually paying any tax at all. You're not clearing anything into Mauritius. So it's a big opportunity there. Education, Mauritius is setting itself up as a knowledge hub. Again, massive opportunities, particularly given the concerns in South Africa at the moment around education and what's happening in some of the educational institutions. You don't get that in Mauritius. So it's a very, I think, compelling argument for some people to come and establish things there. It's a very, very safe, I think that's been touched on already. It's a safe jurisdiction, so people don't mind sending their kids here from all over the world to get educated in whatever. And we need some specialist education facilities here, whether it's fashion and beauty or whatever the case might be, medical, all these things I think are big opportunities in Mauritius. Tourism is, and I think it's pretty complete in Mauritius. We've got very good institutions, very good hotels throughout the island. I'm not sure Mauritius needs any more. And in fact, they're all obviously on their knees at the moment, unfortunately, but they'll recover. So I would stay out of hospitality to that for foreigners. But yeah, there are, and finances is a key area for them as well. I think the financial services sector needs an enormous number of people to come and add value here, and they will all compete with me, and that's fantastic. We don't have a problem with that at all, because the world is a very big place.
That's brilliant, thank you. And in fact, it's quite good that you were touching on some challenges and things, and I think I wanted to turn squarely on Paul Faraz here and ask him about what we're hearing about the EU listing on sort of money laundering and all of that. So I understand government's doing quite a few things, but can you just share with us really what the situation is, because I'm sure people watching will be concerned around this.
Absolutely, Daniel. I think There are a couple of ways to look at it, but the first and foremost is at the outset, no country wants to be on any list of some sort, and that's squarely the government's of Mauritius position. We don't want to be on any list. However, there has been a work that was being done by the Financial Action Task Force in regard to your anti-money laundering and combating of financing of terrorism systems. They started reviewing our systems since 2018. And then, they've submitted, they call that the report, the mutual evaluation report. And then they prompt you as a country, as they're doing with all the 147 other countries in the world. They prompt the other countries to implement other safeguards with regard to AML CFT. So the way the Financial Action Task Force looks at it is there are 40 recommendations and there are 58 recommended actions in terms of your technical compliance and your efficiency. When we started in 2018, and I think that is very important for the South Africans viewers as well, is when we started in 2018, we were complying with only 14 out of the 40 recommendations. And 2 years down the line, we are 35 out of the 40. So we are whitelisted when it comes to the technical compliance with regard to AML CFT.
So you've got the right laws in place.
We've got the right laws in place. The tricky bit is, and to be candid with our guests joining in as well, the tricky bit is whether we are able to show that our laws are effective in effectively combating AML CFTs.
And that's the process that we're under now.
And that's the process because you have 58 recommended actions. And Mauritius, we were complying with only 13, I think. So within 1 year, we complied 53 out of the 58. So we still have 5 strategic deficiencies that we need to comply with. And there is a calendar of events that we have already worked out with the Financial Action Task Force to implement all of those recommended actions by 2022. However, as you're aware and as you mentioned, the EU list came before that, and the EU list is basically looking at the watch list of the FATF and then placing us on the blacklist. So what we have done is we have preponed all the actions that we were supposed to do by 2022, and we're trying to get them. Well, we are trying to achieve them by September of this year or by the end of this year. There's already a progress report that we have submitted at the level of the FATF. And Daniel, I think even for our viewers to understand this, for us to get out of the EU blacklist, we have to show that we are out of the watch list of the FATF. And once we get out, it is axiomatic that we get out of the EU's blacklist. So all our works and efforts are being put to ensure that we get out of the FATF list very soon. And by the way, there is already on the 31st of August of this year, there will be a progress report that will be submitted to the Financial Action Task Force for their approval or for them to assess us.
Well, thank you for this very, very detailed. I think it's important that this we discuss.
Yeah.
Are we back? Yes, it looks like we are. Apologies, everybody. We seem to have had a technical glitch, but we're happy to be back. We were saying that we had reached to really the end of this panel, and the next very, very important part of this event is listening to Grit as a case study really of things happening here. But before we do that, I just wanted a very quick sort of maybe 1 minute for each person on this call to really talk a little bit about the outlook for Mauritius. You know, we've talked about really working here, the business environment, about the challenges for people, for businesses, but maybe a word, you know, final word from everybody in terms of outlook. Maybe I'll start with Samad. Any precious pearls of wisdom for us, Samad?
I think the whole world was taken by surprise with COVID-19, and we're not immune to this as well. Even Mauritius has been affected. And if you look at the latest figures, the economy is going down by 11%, and we're expecting an increase in unemployment rate. But having said that, some sector of the economy, the global business sector, is still resilient today, and it's changed the way we're doing business going forward. And it's a new normal that we need to adapt ourselves with. I think now is the time for all of us to think the way we've been doing business and look at opportunities or other places where we can do it better, and also a place where we can be safer with the family and the kids.
Just any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that listen, Mauritius has had enormous growth in a very short period of time, and I think it's starting to feel a little bit of its growing pains now. There are challenges. There's no doubt about it. There are headwinds, and that's exacerbated by COVID and the lockdown. It's borrowing money, which is increasing the debt, and it's forcing taxes to go up to cover that. So I think that it's a very open democracy in this place. That's one thing it's got going for it. So, you know, people speak. Everybody is very politically astute here, from the taxi drivers through to anybody, the roti sellers. Everybody knows what's going on the ground, and there's nowhere to hide. So politicians are caught out if they bring in the wrong thing. They just won't be voted in again. It's quite simple. And nobody has a stranglehold on power in this place, which is fantastic, and that's the way it should be. Having said that, I think that, you know, we're going to stick it out with our businesses. We're going to go through this, and I think it's easing, and I think it'll ease more once the air lines are reopened and we can start traveling again, and we can start revitalizing the tourism department, which is vital to the country's success. But if people are thinking about coming here, I mean, retiring is a phenomenal place to retire to in Mauritius, where you don't have to work, you don't have to even read a newspaper, which is fantastic. So that's an easy one, and we like to think we played a hand in making retiring here a lot easier, because previously it was very expensive to do so. But yeah, so if anybody needs to find out a little bit more, obviously the South African Chamber is very willing and able to help out with any questions that people might have.
Makes the outlook for the fintech sector?
No, thank you. Just to reiterate Richard's point, you know, I think the purpose, if you're in fintech or financial technology and you're looking to come to Mauritius as a market to grow into, it's not big enough for that, but it's a great stepping stone going elsewhere to the world. So we've seen a lot of South African fintechs, some big names, coming to set up shop in Mauritius. Even before they move into the rest of the African continent, they're looking to be domiciled here and actually set up their businesses locally. So from a fintech perspective and a digitalization of the Mauritius economy, which we're seeing quite a massive acceleration, I think there's massive opportunity. It's a great environment to potentially build POCs and MVPs in the local market and then scale them to Africa or the East. You know, so we're having a lot of interest from Africa to move over into other jurisdictions in Africa. We're now part of the African FinTech Network, which is 32 other African countries. But also we're seeing a lot of interest from the East wanting to move to Africa and vice versa. So the opportunities now in the financial technology space, I think, you know, for all the negatives that have happened around the world, I think a lot of people have realized that cash is old-fashioned. And now's the time for digitalization and the adoption of fintech technology. It's an exciting time to be in the space and be in Mauritius during it.
Yeah, what a time to be in that sphere with Africa and the continental Africa on your doorstep. Well, I'd like to thank all our panelists really around me, and actually turn to Grit. So we can actually move on to the third part of today's session. And I wanted to see whether we're able to see Bronwyn. I don't know if she is online with us.
I am on the line. Can you hear me clearly?
We can absolutely hear you, Bronwyn. I'm not sure we can see you as yet. Hopefully the algorithms are doing their thing and you'll pop up soon. But welcome to this session, and thank you so much for accepting to participate in this and share the great story. And I think that you don't really need much of an introduction. I mean, would I be able to invite you to share the great story and maybe tell us a bit more about, what you're doing and how it's worked out here?
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for having us today. It is really appreciated. It's always a good story to share. I think from our side, and just let me know if you can't hear me clearly, and just give me a shout out if you're okay on the hearing side. But just from our side, we took a decision really 6-7 years ago to decide on a jurisdiction to run an Africa business. And that in that stage, both Dubai and Mauritius were definitely the best sort of points of call for Mauritius and for Africa itself. And a lot of South African businesses were in Mauritius, but a lot of them, with all due respect, were using them as Mauritius as a post box. And I took a decision about 5 years ago, just because of the risk side and also the effective management, that we would actually move the entire business to Mauritius, which meant husbands, wives, dogs, cats, children, and the entire the entire team. And we moved just over 20 families out of South Africa into Mauritius itself. And what the importance of that is that we decided that we were actually going to be domiciled in Mauritius, which meant that we had to take a view on the ability for families to be in Mauritius, for schooling, for all the other facets. And the Grit business, which is really focused around commercial real estate across Africa, there were two other very important aspects. One, we could actually invest in Mauritius itself from a real estate perspective. And I actually heard Richard mentioning that, to do business in Mauritius or do business through Mauritius are two totally different things. So I think anybody needs to recognize that using it as a base is one thing, but actually doing business in Mauritius is another thing. The other aspect was really from the perspective of having really Mauritius as a jurisdiction for Africa, which meant, did we have the ability to travel into Africa? Was it as multi-geography as it had said it was? The other aspect is, were we able to source capital in Mauritius? And a lot of businesses have tried to source capital, equity and debt, and particularly equity, and haven't really had success from the local sort of pension funds, insurance companies and that. But we as Grit obviously took, and as I always say, you don't call your company Grit for nothing. We literally walked the streets of Port Louis. I think I met the National Pension Fund in Mauritius probably about 40 times over 3 years before they gave us a check. But what we found successful is that we were able to source equity, we were able to source debt, and we also were able to be in a jurisdiction which attracted quality staff. So one is the ability for very skilled professional people, especially out of South Africa and the UK, wanting to be based out of Mauritius, and for all the reasons that were just mentioned now around security, around quality of life and all of those things. The other thing that we've had huge success is finding Mauritians that want to return home. So we have found 2 lawyers in Canada that are Mauritians. So to be able to find skilled Mauritians who always ultimately want to come back home to their families, but giving them the opportunity in the business. So today we have just under 100 staff based in Mauritius. Percent of my staff, close to 60, are actually local Mauritians. And we've really seen the success. So when we launched the business in Mauritius, our real estate portfolio was just over $150 million. Grit now sits on a real estate portfolio of commercial sort of multi-asset class of just over $900 million. A quarter of that is invested in Mauritius itself. And our model is really around owning the bricks and mortar, the actual real estate. So we own 4 hotels, not the operations, but the real estate. We own the Barclays head office in New Bed. So it's really been, from our perspective, we've seen a lot of success, but I think the success has really been driven around the fact that we actually took this decision to physically domicile. And I think Richard probably will say the same thing. The importance of actually being present and the importance of actually understanding what's going on. because any new jurisdiction can be very tricky. And because we took the view to actually be based in Mauritius, and really from the process of navigating the nuances like any other country, where we sit today is we now have to say, is Mauritius the place for our future? And yes, there's been some concerns that have been mentioned. The grey list was mentioned earlier. The fact of travel, will travel ever be the same again? And will Mauritius be able to get up to that level of us being able to travel across Africa? But for us, we've definitely come to the conclusion that the base that we have in Mauritius will be the continuous base for our company. Grit listed in London in July 2018. We were the first Mauritian business to list in the UK, which created a lot of firsts for Mauritius. Being able to create that connectivity between both stock exchanges from a company perspective, being able to really pioneer having that sort of governance structure that really ticked a big box with regards to saying, there's always these questions about governance and that, but Grit, who's a Mauritian domiciled business, was able to go through all the governance side to be able to list in London. So, the success of growing our business, the success of people, the success of relationships, we have around about 50% of our share register actually sits in Mauritius itself. You might have seen that we've recently delisted off the JSE, which means primary listing London, secondary listing in Mauritius. And people were surprised at that. A lot of people were surprised that we dropped the JSE listing and not the Mauritian listing. And the whole rationale behind that is that a lot of our equity guys, especially Africa pension funds, like to hold their investments out of Mauritius for many reasons, as I'm sure the panel touched on today. So as the Grit business, and then again, it's just saying, does this country allow a family, an international family, to be able to settle? And is the schooling, the medical, all of these things? And even in the last sort of 4 years of me personally living here, the absolute growth that we've seen. So we're investing in 2 hospitals, oncology hospitals in Mauritius now. So we're seeing a huge amount of opportunity, and we're really excited about obviously what's being caused by COVID, but also extracting the opportunity about what's being caused by COVID. So we're seeing local Mauritian businesses a lot more enthusiastic to partner now, where maybe they weren't historically. We believe partnerships and relationships are absolutely key, both in Mauritius and in other countries. We've had really big support from State Bank of Mauritius. They're one of our largest financiers. So we have really, as I keep on saying, walked the streets of Port Louis, but we've really got to every little part of the country itself and really utilize the resources that have been made available to us. And I encourage anybody that's wanting to settle here to actually spend the time doing that. So, you can't just arrive as a foreign business and expect local money to be invested in you. There's a lot of thing about, a lot of backing of local businesses. And until the pension funds and the insurance companies see you as actually being domiciled here, they do have a big issue with trying to invest through you. So the importance of you, if you're going to extract investment out of Mauritius, is to actually spend the time with the key stakeholders. So from a Grit perspective, and obviously having the listing in London and Mauritian domiciliary, we're very comfortable where we are today.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And what an impressive sort of track record in the last few minutes just listed out. I just wanted to get back and just ask a question about something. So when you turned up, really, I think that there's a few firsts, as you've mentioned. Was there, I think some of the difficulties were, and some of the questions we've had today were around what are the opportunities, what are the sectors in which we could invest? Secondly, about fundraising, can I raise funds? Can I get financing in Mauritius? And thirdly, is there the right sort of business environment? And presumably when you turned up, I think in your case, probably in terms of what you do, there was very little of any of that in terms of, there was nowhere where there was a list of opportunities, there was nowhere where there was a list of funders, and the business environment probably wasn't quite what it should have been. So how did you find sort of blazing your trail as a newcomer, in spite, on top of managing everything else? Can you comment to that? This might be of interest to people sitting at home in South Africa, wondering whether to sort of jump into the cold waters here. Warm, really, but yes.
Yeah. So I think you've correctly said it. I think when we arrived in Mauritius, there was quite a bit of apprehension of foreign businesses. I think there'd been a tendency for foreign businesses to use Mauritius as a post box, and there'd been one or two challenges around certain asset classes and investments in that. So we really were coming up against a very difficult wave of actually saying, is this foreign business for real? Is it actually going to be invested in Mauritius, and is this going to deliver everything it said it's going to deliver? And I think the other thing is that we're not a REIT, but we behave like a REIT. So we pay out distribution to our shareholders every 6 months. And there was also not really an understanding of REITs and the REIT market. So we were paying out a distribution yield of 8% in dollars, and guys were saying, is this too good to be true? Is this a Ponzi scheme? So there was a lot of education around the product offering of what we were actually trying to do. And then I think, the other interesting thing and something I found in South Africa is that Mauritians are actually quite nervous of Africa, and I found South Africans are very nervous of Africa, even though they're all part of the same continent. So, there was a lot of education process of saying, yes, this is Africa, but it's an Africa with a different nuance to it. So for us, that took a lot of time, and we really had to exercise patience around attracting local capital, being debt and equity. And I facetiously say about the National Pension Fund of Mauritius, and he's actually a good friend now, but it literally took me 3 years to get money from them. And it was so important because I had to deliver a sustainable track record, and it had to be in Mauritius. And they are very large investors. They actually own 5% of Grit now. So it was worth the wait, and it was worth going through the processes, but also respecting the processes. Any pension fund is no different to the National Pension Fund of Mauritius. These guys are highly governed, and their due diligence process is severe. And I think a lot of people try and start out this process with them and then get fatigued. And the idea is not to get fatigued, because the capital does exist in Mauritius for the right product. Okay. The second thing, which was extremely helpful, was the extent of local bank support. So we actually deal with probably about 7 local banks now. And again, it was them understanding the Grit business model. And it took time, but the support that we've got now, even during COVID, has been tremendous to see. And being actually recognized as a Mauritian business has been tremendous to see. The other challenge that we had was competing with local Mauritians, basically. So everybody liked the Grit story when we were doing business in other countries, but when we started buying up the real estate in Mauritius, it became a little bit tricky, from just the fact that I think real estate is a very emotional asset class, and it is across Africa. And us buying up real estate in Mauritius became quite tricky, just navigating some of the challenges. And, for us, the whole governance story is key. And unfortunately, with Mauritius, with such a small business market, you have to be really careful on the governance side. And I think the Mauritian sort of business world has understood the fact that you have to be even overly cautious, because there's a lot of cross holdings between businesses that you have to navigate. And it's good to have an understanding of what's actually going on, and to understand who's invested in what and for what reason. So, there's a lot of old money that exists on the island that's cross-invested across some of the in asset classes. So, those are the nuances that you really have to respect and understand. And unfortunately, you can't do it from your office in South Africa, or you can't do it from your office in London. The thing is that you actually really do have to spend the time on the ground. So, the time on the ground is meaning you literally, facetiously, funny enough, walk the streets of Port Louis. I think they saw this crazy blonde woman with her high heels running up and down the streets, because I was literally between SPM, NPF, the lawyers, and I literally got to know everybody, because again, it's all relationship driven. So for us, the time on the ground, the time spent on the ground, I think it was Richard who said, you have to be careful around, you come here on holiday and you have a perception of a place, but things are actually different. And before you throw everything into Mauritius, or you throw all of your investment, or you understand the opportunity, you have to do your due diligence and homework, because there are some sectors here that are bleeding. There's some huge amounts of opportunity, but you have to do your homework. That is absolutely key.
Robin, thank you so much for sharing the great story with us. I think we're inspired here in the room, and I'm hoping people sitting at home or wherever they might be will be too. Thank you so much for this very candid overview, and I think it just goes to show that if you think big and you think big and have grit, then quite a lot is possible anywhere, but certainly for our purposes here in Mauritius. We have 4 minutes left before the end of our maximum time. So I propose that we actually look at some of the questions that have been posted by people attending this webinar. And try to cover a few of those. So, which sectors offer business opportunity? I think that's been covered fairly amply in the course of this presentation. Investment opportunities and residency options. In fact, there are a number of schemes, but rather than go into the detail of that, I think anybody who's interested in that sort of thing should take contact probably with the EDB, who are the point of contact for all those applications and can get into the details of different schemes, but there are quite a few of them. We've talked about sort of COVID-19 and the EU blacklist impact. I think, again, we've talked about the EU blacklist. In terms of COVID, I think it's fair to say that most sectors are back up and running except for hotels. And we're now awaiting, the point which is coming soon, but we haven't got clear visibility over the exact timing of the reopening of our borders. But that means that at least 75% of the economy is running at the moment. Other questions?
I think it's on tax reporting, Daniel, and I think I was looking at the question. Tax reporting and how it affects South Africans. I think let's connect the dots a little bit. If you are there is an occupation permit in Mauritius, so it's for professionals, investors, and retirees, so non-citizens who are above 50 years of age and who wants to come to Mauritius. Now, it used to be that Mauritius used to give an occupation permit, which is basically a work and leave permit for a period of 3 years. Now, with the idea of the government to open up to foreign talents and foreigners in general, the minimum that you can get the occupation permit is now 10 years. So if you're looking to come to Mauritius, you get an occupation permit of 10 years, and then that's renewable. And then after some time, you even get a permanent resident permit of 20 years. Now, how it affects the tax residency is another matter. If you have an occupation permit in Mauritius, you're entitled to work and live in Mauritius. But whether you become a tax resident in Mauritius is governed by the Income Tax Act, which is at Section 4. And you are a tax resident in Mauritius if you stay in Mauritius for a period of more than 183 days per fiscal year. So that would determine your tax resident. Even if you're South African, when you come to Mauritius, you have an occupation permit, so you have the right to work and live in Mauritius, but you become a tax resident if you trigger your tax eligibility in Mauritius.
Thank you very much, Faraz. There's one minute left. We won't trespass on your schedules any longer, but I wanted to really thank all our panelists in the room here. Thank Miggs and Bronwyn, who connected remotely, and also thank everybody who has been joining us online today. Thank you very much. And for any further questions that you may have, I think there's a few contact details that are appearing on your screens. Please feel free to get in touch. And we'll be happy to answer any questions you might wish to email.
And Daniel, sorry, just to piggyback on what you were saying, the EDB has an office in Johannesburg, and my colleague Mr. Shakil Jolim will be posted there, so he will be manning the South Africa office of the EDB. His contact details are on the screen, and you can reach out to us through comments or even through the email addresses, and we'll be very pleased to assist the investors there.
Thank you very much, everybody, and have a brilliant rest of the afternoon. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.